There we go. We got all the bases covered. We got a chair in the room and a chair in cyberspace.
I like that. Yeah.
An IT professional in the room.
No,
An
no,
IT
I don't even want to pretend to play one on television.
Oh, we got a vice chair. Ah, jeez. Seen that good and ready? Okay. All right, I'll call to order the Board of Supervisors regular meeting for Tuesday, February 18th to order. At this time, I ask if you please rise as you are able and remove your hats for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. You may be seated. Next up, we'll discuss the meeting procedures and roll call, and that will be by Mr. Progar.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the members of the board, staff, and public for joining us this evening for the February 18th regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors. This meeting has been properly advertised in accordance with the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act as a hybrid meeting with the option to attend virtually and in person here in the main meeting room. If you are in attendance virtually using the WebEx platform and wish to speak on behalf of an agenda item, please say your name, municipality of residence, and the topic you wish to speak on when the chair calls on you. If you are attending in person with us in the main meeting room and wish to speak on behalf of an agenda item, please address the board at the podium and state your name, municipality of residence, and the topic you wish to speak on. Prior to commencing the meeting, I have a few short procedural items to cover. First, members of the public attending using the WebEx platform are asked to remain muted during the meeting to prevent any ambient noise from disrupting the meeting. If a member of the public is acknowledged by the chair, they may unmute their microphone for their question or comment. Secondly, board members are asked to indicate their name when motioning or seconding a motion so that the minutes may accurately reflect the action taken. Finally, a roll call of the Board of Supervisors will now be taken to ensure that all members can hear and interact using the WebEx meeting platform. Please indicate that you are here when your name is called. Ms. Strickland.
Here.
Ms. Stevens.
Here.
Mr. Thompson.
Here.
Mr. Patterson.
Here.
Mr. Heller.
Here.
Chair, you have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Item 2, announcements and proclamations. I just wanted to take a moment to share some sad news of the passing of Dr. Ellen Terracani, who was a member of our Planning Commission from 2019 to 2023. Dr. Terracani also served on our Center Regional Planning Commission from 2020 to 2023 and had last served as vice chair of our Planning Commission before she stepped down in 2023. Just want to take a moment, join me for a quick moment of silence in recognition of Dr. Ellen Terracani. Thank you. Item 3, public comment. If there's any, you're already going there, Wes. We'll start within the room. If there's any members of the public that want to address the board, just step up to the podium and give us your name and neighborhood of residence and let us know what you want to discuss.
Wes Glebe, Ferguson Township, 115 North Butts. I came tonight to say a few words about Pam Steckler. First, I wanted to thank the board for having her have that short term that she was on the board. It really changed her. It was an eye-opener for her. A very important late in life experience, I think, and I wanted to thank you for that. I hope you've all gotten a copy of her will. Have you?
It was received by the township this afternoon and forwarded to the solicitor and will be provided to the Board of Supervisors with confirmation from the solicitor that
Okay.
it's detailed as stated.
Well, Pam has bequeathed her property on Hoy Street to the township with some very interesting caveats. And I just came tonight to ask you to keep an open mind and think creatively. Okay? It's an exciting opportunity. Whether you can take it or not, we'll see. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room? If not, we'll do a quick check online. Seeing none. Item 4, approval of the minutes. We have a set of minutes from February 4th, 2025. If there is no corrections, I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
This is Patty, so moved.
Got a motion by Ms. Stevens. Do we have a second?
This is Matt, second.
Second by Mr. Heller. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. All right. Item 5.1, reports and presentations. Diversity, equity, and inclusionary activities and acknowledgements. Women's History Month will begin on March 1st. Greek American Heritage Month will begin on March 1st sorry. Irish American Heritage Month will be starting on March 1st, as well as Agriculture Month on March 1st. Employee Appreciation Day will be on March 7th, and International Women's Day will be on March 8th, and Ramadan will end on March 30th. Item 5.2, authorities, boards, and commissions reports. We've got the Spring Creek Watershed Commission, and I will turn it over. It's either, looks like it's Mr. Kevin Abbey.
I don't see Kevin, or Elise, but I attended. And
Yes.
his report is attached, and was quite detailed, so I think you can find everything that was discussed in there. We met at the Harris Township Municipal Building, and yeah, it was a good meeting. And then one addition I wanted to make to his report here was just a very brief discussion brought up by Elise, our AmeriCorps person at Spring Creek Watershed Commission, and that was the discussion of the topic of a water inventory, and how there had, previously, years past, there had been some acknowledgement of the capacity of the water table to service a certain number of residents, and that actually changed how Penn State had calculated enrollment at certain points, and so that was just discussed, at a very surface level. We didn't get into it that far, but it was an interesting idea, and so I hope that gets brought up again throughout the year.
Thank you. Any questions?
No.
All right.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. Item 5.2B, Schlow Library Board of Trustees. And for this evening, it looks like online we have Miss Barbara Ziff joining us.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
So you should have a report in front of you from SCLO, I hope.
Yes. I
Okay.
think that was.
Any questions about anything that is written? We're just very pleased at SCLO that Ferguson Township constituents are using the library very heavily, and also enjoying the drop boxes both at Giant and Pine Grove Mills. And in addition, as listed in the description, the programs at the library for the children, in the children's library are heavily attended and well thought of.
Okay. I was going to say, is there any questions from the board?
Yes, Mr. Heller. If I may, just a comment, because last year at COG, we had actually pushed one of the large line items for the library, which was redoing the floor in the children's area and across different things. So I just want to put that bug in the board's ear that we would expect to see about $32,000 this year, if I remember the numbers from last year, probably coming across the COG's table during budget season. And again, I want to thank the library for being thoughtful and pragmatic and, looking at our budget constraints last year for pushing that into this year. So just something for awareness as we go forward.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Stevens.
What is the book for Center Reads?
You know, that's a great question that I don't know the answer to. But I can certainly get back to you.
That'd be great, thank you. I can look it up online too. I can go onto the website and see. It would be there, right?
If it's been announced, yes, it would be.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other? I just wanted to make a correction. I don't see the report attached, but we can follow up with staff because it sounds like it was received by the township. It may not have got to the agenda, but we'll do some follow-up on that.
Sorry. It mostly focused on the amount, the children's programming and the fall fundraiser. That was really the focus, but I hope you'll be able to read it at a later point.
Yeah, we'll follow up on that. Any other questions or remarks for seeing none? I thank you, Mrs. Ziff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Going to do a little backtrack because Mr. Abbey did show up. We did get a report from Lisa. Just wanted to check there wasn't anything further you wanted to add or.
Thank you. Sitting a little crooked here with my knee propped up, so I apologize for not being able to be in the room with you. If Lisa forwarded the report, it's there. Held our organizational meeting. You can see achievements and plans for the coming year, and I think we're off to a good start.
All right. Going to say if everyone's good, I thank you, Mr. Abbey. Thank you for joining us, and may you get better soon.
Yeah, I would add one thing, if I might.
Yeah.
And that is we're going to host our second State of the Watershed meeting. It will be March 27th. I believe I put that in the report. If I didn't, it should be highlighted, yes, plans for 2025. That will be a 10 to 2 event, and this is the second time we're inviting staff and elected officials and interested parties at Millbrook Marsh. Thank you.
Thank you.
Had to get that plug in.
Appreciate it. Next up will be item 5.3, our COG and Regional Committee reports, starting with Human Resources Committee. We forwarded the leave of absence without pay policy over to Executive Committee, where we did approve that and moved it on to General Forum. So that will be coming down this month. And that's all I have. Any questions?
I actually have two, and it's more of a, maybe it's more of a comment, like, are we, when we do these kind of policies at the COG level, are we kind of taking some of that and bringing that goodness into the township and vice versa? Hey, there's this really great policy that COG's doing, and so now the township's doing it. So maybe that's a Madam Manager question, but just kind of just a flavor of if we're utilizing the goodness that's happening.
There's a great deal of collaboration between the managers and the executive director. We meet monthly and we discuss where that collaboration can take place. So where there's an update with the county, perhaps with the GSS software, or an update with the region, for example, the municipal ordinance, the solid waste ordinance, right? We had Shelley Maddow come and do a presentation. So I would say in part, yes, there is that collaboration, but there are certainly different needs between the COG. They operate as a very separate entity. We operate as a home rule charter, which is also a very separate entity from our counterparts, that operate as a second-class township or as a borough, for example, the State College Borough as a home rule charter. So where it makes sense, we do have that collaboration, but not for every policy, particularly as it relates, for example, to the fact that we have a police department and they don't, right? That will impact and inform based on our accreditation requirements that we have to meet. It may, kind of force us to deviate away from maybe things that COG are doing. So yes, in part, and no in other ways.
Okay. Just if that's, well. And question 2 was on the, what was that other one? In the parks job description in the HR, I saw something about trees and benches. And so kind of another, as part of our effort to collaborate, find savings within our own, was there an opportunity to for tree stuff at the COG level to come to the municipality and we could help out kind of in a broader sense?
I would have to defer that to staff, if not the Parks Director at Center Region Parks and Rec.
Okay.
I would echo that. I think that is probably a more direct question to the Executive Director of Parks and Recreation, Christy Owens. They do have different programs, for example. They have programs that inform how they manage and purchase the bench. For example, there's dedications, and so I can't speak to all of those different programs and processes for how you might get a bench, dedicated to a member of the township. So they have programs that we don't. They do our operations. So I would certainly encourage for that conversation to start with Christy Owens and/or Ben Estelle as the executive director, and then he would either decide to bring Christy in, the executive director, or answer that question directly.
I'll call you. I'll talk to Ms. Stevens offline on opportunities for the township to utilize COG in perhaps other ways, and then how we can get that collaboration here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? If not, 5.3B, the Land Use and Community Infrastructure Committee.
Yep, we spent some more time on the comprehensive plan update. It was not a very long meeting, and we spent most of the meeting just going over some language for values and vision, and I think some of the specific action steps that'll be included as well. So we should get that language that was changed back to us next month.
Thank you. I was looking at some of your agenda materials, and am glad to, I don't know, shamelessly say, I'm glad to see that passenger rail is a common theme amongst the municipalities. Any other questions for? 5.3C, Climate Action Sustainability Committee.
All right, so the Climate Action Sustainability Committee did meet last Monday. A couple different things. We had a presentation from a Penn State student, graduate student, on what we would expect here in the Center Region climate-wise over the next upcoming 50 years. Warmer and wetter was the result. So temperatures higher, areas of precipitation increasing. A couple suggestions that came out of that, increase or try and reduce our demand on the power grid, etc. Also, stormwater, improved drainage was a common theme as well, based on what we learned there. We also talked about the upcoming refuse contract, and I know the question from the board members here at our last meeting was, when will the carts be delivered?
I came today.
There it is. Yeah, special delivery. So they will be delivered starting yesterday and March 21st. So residents can expect to see those showing up at their homes. Other than that, I think that's a high-level overview. happy to answer any questions.
Well, I'll just add on to what you had said about the delivery of the carts. So when they delivered them, they had little flyers attached to them, and basically making sure that people don't use those trash cans until April 1st was sort of the thing. So they're being delivered, but not to use them till April 1st. So yeah, I tried to notify all my neighbors because it was windy and I didn't want the little tags
yeah.
blowing off, and I didn't want the carts blowing away. So anyway, yeah.
So now, before you dirty them, bring them into the house, wax them, keep them warm by the fire, you know? And then put them to use on April 1st, yes.
There you go.
Oh, and by the way, the first invoices we would expect to see around mid-March. So that'll be from the new hauler, Bergmeyer's.
And I just continue putting a plug in. The COG has utilized extra resources for customer support that if you do have any questions or concerns, pick up the phone, call, and they'll help answer those for you, so.
Thank you for that.
Yep. 5.3D, Public Safety Committee was canceled. That moves us on to 5.3E, the Finance Committee.
Well, hello again.
Hi again.
So a couple things high level from the Finance Committee, and I'll just read these down through order. First one is the fund balance. That was a big discussion that we had, I know, here in Ferguson as well as other municipalities. The fund balance policies, the changes, we would expect to start hearing more and addressing them in April and May of this year. So the Finance Committee is going to be leaning heavily into that. I know the new executive director there has some ideas, and we expect to have those conversations here in the upcoming months. So that is coming up. Also wanted to kind of follow up with some of the operating budget after action items. First one being it was requested by one of the members of the Finance Committee to have a rundown of the Parks program attendance. What programs are being utilized, which ones maybe not, et cetera. So maybe to help inform decisions, if for no other reason other than transparency, to see how well the different programs are being attended. Also, another thing, the motion for the architecture for the pavilion over at Whitehall Road Regional Park, that was put forth and will be moving to the Executive Committee and General Forum. And that's for $43,950 to Fernsler Hutchinson for the architecture of those. But we did put caveats in the motion related to first receiving a timeline, right? Not just writing a blank check for the money, but understanding the timeline better before this is released, as well as identifying a contractor and a couple other more minor provisions to the motion as you might read it within the actual agenda. So that was another thing. And then finally, the budget document, there's a consolidation that's going to be happening this year. There were two documents, for those that may not be aware. One was the program plan, and the other was the capital improvement plan. These are two separately maintained, developed documents, X, Y, Z, enough of that. They're being merged, consolidated, so the Finance Committee was asked to weigh in kind of understanding and supporting what we'd like to see in it, the order of material, et cetera, and what might make it readable. So we anticipate seeing some of that, those changes coming up here for the new year. Also, again, with the idea of efficiency, so that they're not developing two separate documents and everything else. Okay, that was the rundown. Happy to answer any questions.
Do we need to speak up?
Am I not speaking?
Do we need to speak up?
Well, that's one thing,
That's what.
Oh, I'm trying.
but I need to comment, because I couldn't, you were not speaking up, and I couldn't stay up with you.
Feel free to go up front.
Bill Keogh, Ferguson Township. I wasn't able to keep up with the speed with which you were moving from one committee to the other in terms of reports. And I wanted to go back to the refuse committee issue. One of the things that keeps coming up out in the western end is we understand that the new refuse provider is going to place the buckets where they want them placed on pickup day. A discussion probably needs to be had and information given to at least the western end of the township and it's timely because we're in snow territory. Where they want them placed and the snow plows and what the snow plows do in the rural end of the county is different than what they do in the urban end of the county. Biggest thing is speed. Our snow plows are operating at a much higher speed in the rural side of the county than they are in the urban side of the county. And so they're throwing snow and ice much further. And the issue of closeness to the road during snow plowing events, because they want us to have those things out there at a fairly early time period for pickup, both for waste management and for recycling. And so I don't know whether a discussion has been had. This particular waste hauler, I know, does work in rural areas. It's just that that information has not been moved along to us out in the western end with regard to the snowplow issue. I know they knocked over our garbage can this last week when they were plowing. So I just mentioned that so that you can take that back to the committee and see if you can get some kind of resolution.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
If I could just ask a clarifying question, a resolution working towards what end? Are we talking about a time shift or a location change? I just want to understand so I'm taking it back properly.
Well, and a discussion internally, possibly, with regard to the speed at which our snowplows are operating in the rural end of the township, unlike the more urban end of the township, where they're not throwing the snow nearly as far in the urban side of our snow plowing than they are out in the western side. When they go by my house, I don't know, we could have Chief sitting in my driveway one of those days and just run the speed trap and see, but I've got to tell you, I believe that it exceeds the speed limit on Tadpole Road. And I know that, Whitehall Road's a straight stretch, and they've got to get it off of the road, and they move pretty quickly there too. So maybe that kind of a discussion might have to be had in terms of the snow period. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, no problem with setting our garbage in the right-of-way, and that's probably where they want us to set it, is in the right-of-way. But clearly in the wintertime, the snow issue may be an issue. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, I think as the rep there, you can,
Yep.
on the placement, you can take that back to the committee. And as for snowplow operations, that's going to be with the manager and the public works crew. Yes, Mr.
Yeah,
Heller.
and if I may, I know being on the main drag in Pine Grove Mills, it's actually PennDOT that's responsible for it. And in many cases, we've had neighbors that have had chipped siding, holes put in siding, because the plows sometimes go through so fast that they're throwing cinders and other stuff. So yes, I'm sure we could figure out a conversation with maybe PennDOT too going forward. So
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, and I was going to say, the manager is good with contacts and network
Oh, yes.
connections through Harrisburg, so,
Thank you.
yep, good, all good points. Anything else for, what committee was it? For finance? If not, I'll move into executive committee to close out this item. We as well talked about the architecture and design of the pavilion. We did some more refining of the motion.
Okay, oh boy, all right.
So interestingly, there was a lot more discussions around the motion than the item itself. We did keep the not to exceed in there and added on, not to exceed with our approval from general forum, but then also added on to the end, reporting, proper reporting through the relevant committees and back to the boards. Just kind of taking what we've learned from, some of the things that unfolded through the solar power purchasing agreement to just make sure there's transparency and upfrontness when, with cost, and also making sure that communication doesn't break down throughout the process, so, yeah. Now we'll go to forward to general forum then. Any questions? Right, seeing none, that will move us over to item 5.4, the department reports, and I'll recognize the manager.
Thank you. Provided with the agenda packet is a copy of the department reports. Happy to answer questions if there are any questions.
Any questions for the manager? I was just gonna say, I was looking through the, yes, Ms. Strickland.
I was just gonna ask about the automated speed enforcement project.
Yes.
And what kind of, I guess, kind of how that originated, because we didn't see anything through here, and last time automated speed enforcement came in front of our board, we said no, and so I was just wondering how we
Yeah, that's a
got
great,
to this point.
that's a great question. So the last time, actually, the police department had submitted for a grant to purchase LPRs, license plate readers. And so the distinguished difference here is that what was in front of the board at the last time, appropriately so, would have been authorization for as a policy item, for grant funds that should have gone in front of the board but didn't. And what staff had done was already submit the grant, and then we got the grant funding to install LPRs, license plate readers, but we would have owned them and they would have gone on our traffic signals on our roads. The distinguishing difference here is that this is a project that would be if the North Atherton corridor was selected, it is a PennDOT road, and they would not be our license plate readers, and they would be temporarily installed as part of a bigger project and study that was being conducted by a transportation advisory committee that is comprised of state level officials to better understand how license plate readers could be implemented statewide. So really it would be providing data to support how license plate readers can better be used as tools. We're not seeing local radar get passed. Therefore, we're not seeing that level of support for our officers to be able to properly mitigate traffic fatalities, incidents. And so while there was a study that was done and approved by legislation in, I believe it was Philadelphia, that was a 4-year study just to see how license plate readers under what conditions would be supported and approved at the state level. What they did take out of that were if LPRs are to be placed along the next, within the next study along state corridor roads, what are some conditions? One, for example, being that you can only take forward rear-facing photos of vehicles. And so this is a study that would be done at a level involving the state. It would not be owned, the license plate readers would not be owned by Ferguson Township, and it really would be, if we're selected to be part of this study, which if we're selected, that would come to the board for a discussion, just so there's an understanding as to what exactly is happening. But at this point in time, it's just a corridor that's being considered for the next study that's being done by this advisory transportation committee at the state level.
Thank you. So that does clear it up. So if this corridor were to be selected, that would still come in front of the board?
For a discussion. I mean, it's really something that I would say is not within my, the township's purview. It's a PennDOT road, and while 3 of our traffic signals would be identified to place the temporary license plate readers, if we're selected, we could say we oppose it. And I guess that we would really kind of venture that when we got to that point, if we got to that point.
And it's more of a budgeting question too, just because they'd be on our
it would not
our
be any
equipment. So but it would be their equipment using ours. Right. So but we wouldn't,
no budgetary funds of the township would be expected for participation of the study. That's the way that I understand it.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Patterson.
Yeah, 2 things. Number 1, I saw the audit work is underway. Very excited about that. Thank you. Question is, are our books closed for 24?
Yes.
When's the last time our books were closed by the end of December?
Oh, it's been, well, the books actually closed 30 days after the end of the fiscal year, so January 31st. I don't have that data in front of me, but I will tell you that it's been a long time. The practices in recent previous years are that, you know, the township has allowed for charges from the fiscal year up until the audit was completed. Our books closed January 31st for fiscal year of 2024.
Fantastic. It's been a long time since that's happened. Well done, Madam Manager and staff on that. At least since I've been here, hasn't happened. So good. Not a long time.
And steps are being made too. I mean, last year, of course, we had that situation where it, you know, became quite apparent that we were not meeting our deadlines, and we provided the board with a review of the last 10 years, and it became apparent to me as your manager, oh, we've really actually not been in compliance with our own charter, so we made some adjustments and some changes to become in compliance. And what I will also say is that staff has taken extra effort this year, not only to ensure that the books are closed by January 31st of 2025, but that we're getting our contract award bids out. You're seeing a lot more contract award bids over the next couple of weeks on your board agendas. Pipelining awards are going to be in front of you, some this evening, and then in future meetings in the very near future. And what we're realizing is that if we want to close the books and make sure invoices are processed and paid by December 31st, we need to get those projects awarded much earlier in the year. And that's something that staff has been dedicated to process and really kind of reevaluate their work plan to ensure that we can meet this compliance. So yes, hats off, kudos to staff. I'm really appreciative of everyone making some adjustments. Thank you for the recognition.
Yeah, well done. I've got more. So then the next one was planning. I saw that we've got a number of things in the hopper through the commission, so we're appreciative of seeing that work there. The one question I had was I saw that there were 2 entries where they kind of have the MPC date, and then underneath there's 5 items that also have expiration dates. Should those have also been in there? I mean, I just making sure I understood the flow of this.
What page are you referring to?
Sorry, this is,
That's okay.
well, of the full docket, it's 89 out of 207.
Land development, subdivision plans.
Yeah, so under Planning Commission review, there's the West College Ave Stack and Store, Blaze Alexander, but then underneath that, it's got under staff review, it's got 5 items.
Right.
Just didn't know if all 5 should have been in that other table. And more of a minor thing, just to understand, again, the flow of this.
Yeah, why don't we comment? Oh, go ahead. Do you have a question?
So I have they get combined, maybe something shifted when they got combined.
Oh, okay.
But for land development subdivision plans under staff review, there are 5, the PSU, Start Lab, the Blaze Alexander, the Stack and
The table
Store.
above that, there's 2. Just in the, yeah, right there.
Here?
Yeah. Is that different from the below? There's 2 rows there.
Oh, it should be I see what you mean.
Okay, all right.
All right, so
Good.
we'll
That's
go ahead and
cosmetic.
provide
It's
it.
just
Yeah.
the summary of the meat is what's listed
Copy that.
underneath.
Very good, thank you. Next on there.
Just a reminder to make sure we're projecting our volume enough for those in the room to hear.
Yes, very good. The next one's Whitehall Regional Road. I see that it's awaiting some sort of resubmission. Was that the same resubmission or another one? Are we
I'm
almost
happy to
there?
report that the minor alteration plan has been signed and submitted to the county. The only thing that we are still waiting for is a review from the stormwater engineer on the stormwater as built. At this point in time, I don't have any reason to believe that it won't go through smoothly, but I also don't have a report indicating that it's been approved and adherence to our comments. So I anticipate an update within the next 1 to 2 weeks, and hopefully we'll have a really positive update by general forum.
The word that I got in from the executive director today and the executive committee is we're waiting for the plan recording from the county. So until that person comes with the receipt, that's where we're at.
Very good. And then the last one was to Chief. I saw that we've got a slight uptick kind of year over year in some calls around theft. Anything to be worried about in the township? Any
People just decided to steal more this year, I guess. That's the only, there was nothing
Okay. it's-
unusual that I noticed.
Okay,
It's
but
just
my-
a higher
okay.
number, that's all.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Glebe,
Can I ask a question?
step up front real quick.
It may have already been answered, but my question's pertinent to the traffic study, the plate readers. Will that data that the state organization collects be shared with Ferguson? I mean, I think it's an exciting program, but it would be really nice to have an understanding of, you know, what they find out and what they project the efficacy to be.
Great question, and it's my understanding that we will receive some of that data as it relates to our traffic, or the volume of incidents that or the number of incidents that we have. So when we pulled the stats there along that corridor, we had, I believe, 271 calls for service for our police department related to traffic issues. And so, yes, I would agree with you. And one of the interesting areas of which I would support for the automatic speed enforcement devices, right? So the LPRs are what were initially brought to the township a couple of years ago as part of a grant. This is what I believe the state refers to them as the automatic speed enforcement devices. So I apologize, I wasn't as clear, but the study that is being presented by the state, if we're selected, and that's something I just want to make sure is abundantly clear, is that if the North Atherton corridor is selected to participate in that study, it would be for what they refer to as automatic speed enforcement devices. And yes, it's my understanding that we would have access to some of that data to better help us understand. That's the whole purpose of the study,
Great.
is to better help us understand the data.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I did have one
Mr.
more
Patterson has one more thing.
Chief, I asked you, I think I ask this every month, I just want to say, we'll ask it one more time. So the use of force, it's actually down as compared to other months over the past 6 months. That's exciting. Is that the big signs working, like, hey, click or ticket, you know, you will stop drinking and driving? Is that, what would you say?
Well, yeah, but it's also cold and nobody's going outside, so think about that too.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that definitely helps though, you know, putting signs out and those types of things, so
Okay.
I'm sure, but yeah, it's hard to predict when the use of force is gonna go up or down because it's just human behavior, right? So.
And then I think the last thing is, are we working towards kind of a data-driven decisions about our, like, kind of, maybe in future policies that the board enacts or thinks are, like, will we have that data? I think we have lots of data here, and you can present it every month, but will we have that data on, hey, we don't use of force only between 9 p.m. and 4 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. That's what I've seen in all our use of forces. And so does that drive some policy changes? I don't know the answer to that. I'm just kind of thinking through it, but wanted to, I guess, pick your brain, not necessarily now, but maybe tickle the brain and let you think about it and bring something forward if that's, well, if the board can help in some of your decision making, policies that help in your decision making and execution.
Something we can discuss with the manager and probably bring back if that's appropriate.
That's all I got. Thank you.
All right. And, yeah, definitely thank our finance team and staff on getting those books closed, getting us back in alignment with the charter. Madam Manager, I saw we're hiring for Public Works Director, and, you know, hope that search is going well. And I imagine there is probably other vacancies as well throughout the township. So we are hiring, and want to throw out, looks like we're looking at a tentative schedule for April on audio enhancements in the room. My understanding, we got some improvements on the overhead speakers. We got the microphones down. We just need to get the speaker system up to levels that project well. So,
That's
thank
correct.
you. Seeing none other, that will move us over to item 6, unfinished business. We'll start with a public hearing on an ordinance amendment of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, Chapter 25, Trees, Part 1, Street and Park Trees, Section 110, Violations and Penalties, Paragraph 2. It looks like this was to be presented by the arborist, but I will defer to the manager.
Thank you. Yes, the arborist is not with us this yes, Larry McGinnis, we are now referring to his title as the urban forester, previously known as the arborist. He is not with us this evening, but this ordinance amendment, the proposed ordinance amendment was in front of the Board of Supervisors for review and discussion when Mr. McGinnis was here and presented with his nice demonstration there with the tree there. So the board had approved the proposed ordinance amendment and authorized for advertisement of the public hearing. And this evening, the board is asked to hold the public hearing, receive comment, and then take action on the proposed ordinance amendment, which would actually formally adopt and ratify the amendment to Chapter 25.
All right. Thank you, manager. This is a public hearing, so at this time, I will open the floor to any members of the public that want to address the board. Seeing none, the public hearing is now closed, and I would entertain a motion.
Is Amari so moved? Well, I guess you need the whole thing, don't you? I move that we adopt the ordinance amendment to Chapter 25 Trees, Part 1, Street and Park Trees, Section 110, Violations and Penalties.
Do we have a second?
Patty, and I'll second.
Got a motion by Mr. Patterson, seconded by Ms. Stevens. Any discussion? Yes, Mr. Heller.
I'm just curious about the new action film, The Urban Forester. I'm sorry, that's an interesting term, isn't it? I didn't know we were changing that, so. The Urban Forester, I look forward to that trailer. No comments on the motion.
Regarding the motion, just from my brainstem, the summary here is that we were kind of unfairly throwing off a bunch of dollars toward a seemingly sometimes accidental thing. Some people, I think that's the way he described it. Some of them were on purpose, most were accidents. And that there was a very large penalty for that. And so really we're just lining up with all the rest of the townships and areas around these things, and there's a plan to replace when that happened. So, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, the manager will call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a roll call vote for ordinance 1108. Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Strickland?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Heller?
Yes.
Thank you. And your ordinance amendment passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. Item 6.2, this is the title, which is actually longer than the narrative, but I'm going to read it. A public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, to enter into the power purchase agreement with CL Route 58B LLC, the servicing agreement, retail commodity master agreement, and retail electricity purchase and solar transaction confirmation with Direct Energy, the in-schedule implementation agreement with CL Route 58B LLC and Direct Energy, the memorandum of understanding MOU with other municipal members of the Center County Solar Group, and an amendment to the cost-sharing agreement. And the manager is recognized.
Thank you. At a regular meeting held on January 21st, the board may recall that the board took action to formally approve the solar power purchasing agreement and all the related documents. The Center Region the COG, the Center Region COG has indicated that the other SPPA approvals have gone through a resolution approval process, and per our charter, the board has to actually, for approval by resolution, conduct a roll call vote. And so tonight is just formally taking action to ensure that the resolution to approve the SPPA agreement and all related contracts is done so by way of a roll call vote. Happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, there is a recommended motion provided with the agenda.
All right, thank you. And this too is a public hearing to fall in line with what the manager had just said, so I will ask for any comments from the room. Seeing none, the public hearing is now closed, and I believe Mr. Patterson wants to be recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The last part of that long title, does that need to be done by resolution, or is it everything associated with the contracts with the the provider? And the last piece is more of a side agreement?
So provided within the agenda is a copy of the resolution, and so it itemizes out the SPPA as well as the related contracts. And so it specifies what specifically would need to be included and is included. In consultation with the solicitor, we did prepare and present as part of the agenda packet for your review. So your answer to your question is yes, all of the above as outlined in the agenda packet.
Any other questions?
Yes. I want to maybe ask it in a different way. So COG required us to do the cost sharing as part of a resolution?
That was part of the document as a related contract, so I had to kind of sift through all the details that you were indicating. Yes, and so all of this narrative was actually in the previous discussion by the board. It's just now actually documented within the resolution. And COG asked that we would reaffirm the commitment by way of a resolution to be consistent with the other municipalities.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I will entertain the motion at this time.
This is Patty. I move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution.
And do we have a second?
This is Matt, I'll second.
Got a motion by Ms. Stevens, seconded by Mr. Heller. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Heller.
I'm just curious because it made the news here late January, and I was just pulling it up here with the governor's new lightning plan that seeks to keep and maybe cap some energy costs, et cetera, in Pennsylvania for consumers. I've not seen if that also relates to companies or government, et cetera, or how that might impact us. And I wasn't sure if there's been any research or discussion, since that is kind of hot off the press, of how that might impact either the solar power purchase agreement or other costs that we might see.
That's a great question, and I have not, had conversations with the managers or our solicitor regarding this question. So we can certainly give that consideration, but I have not had those conversations.
Okay. I mean, at this point, I seconded the motion, I believe in the motion. I just think this is something we want to keep on our radar as we look at trends and everything over the upcoming months and years down the road. But that one did come in at late January. So, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? If no further discussion, I will have the manager call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. This is a roll call vote for Resolution 2025-5. Ms. Strickland?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Heller?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. The resolution passes unanimously.
All right. Item 7.1, we have the consent agenda. Tonight we have the acceptance of the treasurer's report, award of 2025 C5, the stormwater cleaning, award 2025 C14 street tree planting, 2025 C2 Sycamore Drive turnaround, Rogan easement, pay application 14 for aquatic resource restoration 2018 C20, pay application 13 for aquatic resource restoration 2018 C20, a special event permit for the Overlook Heights Block Party, an authorization for payment in the amount of $3,700 to a property owner as part of the Pioneer Ridge subdivision stream restoration project. We have a building access policy approval and a board member request. If there is no items that the board wants to pull, I would entertain a motion to approve those items. Mr. Heller.
I would actually like to pull letter H, the authorization for payment of $3,700 for discussion.
Okay. Any others?
I don't necessarily need to pull it if there's an attachment that goes with item J. I just noticed there was no attachment for that.
Yeah, I don't see an attachment either on that one. So you would want to pull that? It just shows item report.
Yeah, we can pull it just to get a
Okay.
description of what it is.
Any others? Mr. Keough, I do see your hand up, but unfortunately, we usually don't. Okay, well, it's been pulled. We normally don't discuss the consent agenda, but, okay. Any others then? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda absent of items H and J.
Is Amari so moved?
This is Patty, I'll second.
Got a motion by Mr. Patterson, second by Ms. Stevens. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say no. All right. Consent agenda item 7-1H, authorization for payment in the amount of $3,700 as part of the Pioneer Ridge subdivision stream restoration project. Mr. Heller is recognized.
Yes, if I may, it really is just a question. I'm trying to understand the $3,700 payment as it relates to the letter from the residents. I'm not getting the connection between what they've offered up and money being extended by the township. So maybe if you could just help me understand how those two are related.
Great question. So the property owner of the property that we're discussing, there's $700 that is allocated for the temporary construction easement, right, per the restoration that we are doing as part of our MS4 project. The other property owners that live along that stream bank have not only a temporary construction easement that the township is utilizing, but also acquiring some property as part of a permanent easement. Unique to this individual property owner is that according to this property owner and verified by the township engineer, as communicated to me, this property owner has lived in Ferguson Township for 32 years. And initially when moved into that property, had, expressed concern to the township that the portion of property that abuts up against his property there into the stream bank was corroded and eroded and very badly maintained. Came to the township, requested for assistance requested that the township clean up the property, but the township allegedly, I can't verify with the exception of what the property owner has shared with me and our staff who was here during that time. The township informed this resident that it was their property and their responsibility to manage that, what is actually our easement, the township-owned property. So this individual had shared that he went and, rented an excavator and did some grading and invested in invested in trees and shrubs to do a nice little landscape buffer there and has properly maintained it for the last 32 years. And then as part of this project, it's my understanding that we, of course, went and said, hey, we're going to need a temporary construction easement, but in addition to that, we are also going to need to rip up all these shrubs and trees, and that's where this property owner expressed dissatisfaction and frustration with the township. He initially expressed that frustration to the township engineer who brought it to me. I had a conversation with the property owner, and I said, talk to me about what the cost was to do the work that you did, and to make this right, the township can certainly reimburse for those costs. So you're seeing $3,000 for the investment from the homeowner to plant the landscape that we are now going to need to rip out and claim as our property, as well as the $700 for the temporary construction easement. And I strongly recommend that we do that to settle this.
Yeah. Well, I think I just want to applaud the township and staff then for making the homeowner whole in a sense. It is a loss of the shrubs, and I understand that it's a shame, the time invested that they have there. And, okay, I appreciate, again, just trying to make whole. Thank you. I have no issues with this.
Thank you.
I just want to double click on that. Thank you,
Yes.
staff, for like doing the right thing. Sounds like there was some this different information a long time ago, and now that the new information's come out that it is township property and we should have been maintaining it for a while, that we're doing the right thing to make that homeowner whole and now do what we were supposed to be doing.
Thank you to the board for providing support and allocation of funds so we can continue to proceed and make this resident, content and satisfied with the circumstances, and also continue to move along our MS4 permit requirements. Thank you.
One small additional question, the budget for that, just the overall project, that money, that $2,600 extra isn't gonna break the budget for that project, right?
No.
Okay,
We're good. Thank you. I did check and confirm.
fantastic.
Perfect. I was going to say, if nobody has any further questions or comments, I would entertain a motion on this item.
This is Matt. I move to authorize for payment in the amount of $3,700 to property owner 140 Wyoming Avenue as part of the Piney Ridge Subdivision Stream Restoration Project.
Isomari, second.
Got a motion by Mr. Heller, second by Mr. Patterson. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say no. Motion passes. That will leave us then with consent agenda item 7.1J, the board member request resolution to reaffirm and expand the township's commitment to equity and inclusion. Before I hand this off, I'll just note that this is more of a procedural item where us going through our board procedures manual was brought forward to the board, and we are just simply voting to put it on the next agenda. So just leaving that out there. So whichever board member wants to.
Well, it was my request, so I will just say, the letter that I had written to the manager and the chair was basically talking about, in response to feedback I had received, and asking for like clarity in communication, like what is the township doing? What is the township's, and specifically, what is, in terms of the broader picture of what's happening federally, in regards to immigration? What is Ferguson Township Police Department doing? What are they doing? And so for me, it was just a clarifying what our police can do, what our township can and can't do, etc. It was more as a communications to let staff, board, residents, and everybody know roles and responsibilities. So.
Thank you, and if I can, Chair, I'll just say that Supervisor Stevens did submit a proposed packet, or what do we call that, a proposed package to identify what the item is for request for discussion with the board, as well as, a narrative that helped link to how this is part of the township's mission and overall strategic plan. Supervisor Stevens did comply with the Board of Procedures manual. As part of the Board of Procedures manual, however, it also indicates that while staff is exempt from this item, it also acknowledges that a board member may come and discuss with the manager as to maybe what we might do to craft that a little differently. And so we had some conversations and identified that the township had already committed with the resolution very similarly titled in 2017. And so, rather than a discussion that could potentially, result in various conversations to which maybe some of which we can't speak on because it's policing, and some of it, understanding that if the sole purpose is to reaffirm our commitment to inclusion and equity and ensuring that, all are treated and, in the same way, and that we're not seeking to exclude individuals based on religion, ethnicity, race, etc. Supervisor Stevens was in support of a resolution just reaffirming the township's position and commitment. And so that is what went on as the board member consent agenda item. And I did not ask Supervisor Stevens to rewrite her package proposal just because of it being inefficient and a matter of redundancy, but happy to have shared this narrative and this explanation. I hope that helps. Otherwise, we certainly can ask Supervisor Stevens to rewrite something and bring it back on for a future agenda item if this
I'm happy to do that.
verbal, yeah, so, and I'm happy to work with you to do that.
Perfect.
Yes, Mr. Patterson.
Lisa, did you have anything on?
No.
Okay, so from a next steps, this will come back in a future meeting for direction and agreement from the board on what that direction is. Is that accurate?
No, part of the discussion that we had is that we would just reaffirm through reinstating a very similarly written, but with current dates, the resolution that was already approved in 2017.
But that's, yeah, so I'd rather there be some board direction on what to do, not necessarily kind of, let's go do a thing. So I think we should have exactly what should come next, which is board discussion on what should be the next action.
And I think that's,
What I just heard was the next step was a resolution coming before the board. I'd like to have board discussion
Right.
on what should come before the board.
So this was Supervisor Stevens' item, and so working with me as the manager, we crafted and decided that rather than the discussion take place, this was what she was content with. And if I'm misspeaking, Supervisor Stevens,
No,
please
that's
indicate otherwise.
right.
So her request is now to have this resolution and just have one that was done in 2017
I
updated.
understand one board member requested a thing, but
Right.
the board should request a thing.
This is a board member request in accordance with the board manual procedures. This would be the process. And the reason we're not having the discussion is because it is more operational, and there are some areas of concerns as to how that could be further concerned.
Thanks so much for I understand the request now, so it's asking to reaffirm a previously authorized resolution.
Yes.
That's clarifying, and then if there were some other requests, some other
It would
board
go
member
through.
could present a
That is
different
correct.
discussion request. I appreciate that clarification. That was my question, because the request hadn't been attached, but I understand it's to renew the resolution that was already previously enacted. I understand, thank you.
I take it, Mr. Patterson, you want to have input on the new resolution, which I think would be a matter of discussion for
Yes.
the next meeting, should the board tonight authorize to move
Yes.
this item forward.
Yes. There hasn't been a single board request, at least that I've put out there, that has immediately led to a resolution. There's always been discussion. I don't want to change our process, so that's all I'm asking is for consistency in our process for
Right.
board-led discussions. I have no problems with the resolution, but I just want to adhere to our process that at least that I've been a part of, which is board member request, consent agenda. After the consent agenda, there's a board discussion about the action to direct, and then there's the action, and we go vote on that action. That's my request.
Absolutely, and I agree with you. The consistency, I would say there is inconsistency here as to how it's happened in previous times, and largely it's a result of what transpired as part of our conversation. And that conversation is part of the process that's outlined. It's just that hasn't happened with any of your board member request items.
Copy
Where
that.
we were able to sit down, we have sat down and talked about your items, but it didn't immediately say, okay, well, how about we just go ahead and expedite this into a resolution? It could happen that way,
Oh.
but your items have been more certainly, it stayed aligned with how you submitted it. In this particular case, it morphed into a resolution.
And I was gonna say, I'm still relatively new since the chair gets the board member request. But when Patty had presented her item for the consent agenda, I was able to cite a previous resolution just from my recollection on what she had, where I at least, well, other than maybe one that you sent me on parks, I was able to cite some previous action, so. But yeah, I think between Patty and the manager, we want to start with a resolution based off what the previous resolution was and then go from there, so. If that helps clarify that. Doesn't say that anything you bring forward might turn into a resolution, you never know.
I'd like to be consistent, period.
Right.
The board should be directing what happens, not a single individual. Like, if it's operational, we shouldn't do it. Like, let the manager do what the manager's gonna do. But if it's a board thing, and the board wants to say, let's do this, then the board should say it, not any single individual.
Okay. So are you saying then
I'm
the
saying
board
the
member
next
cannot
action-
propose a
the-
resolution?
No, I'm not saying, I'm saying that if a board member wants to bring forth a resolution, that they can, in their consent agenda item, saying, hey, I'd like this resolution. The next board meeting, after it goes through this process here, where we consent agenda, we're good. Next meeting, okay, let's review the thing you brought forth, which is a resolution.
Okay.
Do we want the staff to spend time on that resolution as a board? Yes. Board, now go work the resolution.
Makes sense.
This is probably gonna be easier, whereby it's, okay, Ms. Stevens wants to bring the resolution back, reaffirm it, change the dates, cool. Now, do we want staff to spend time on that, and then it's a thing next week, right? There's gonna be some other board feedback on what that is, not necessarily a single board member saying, this is what I want, let's go do it, right? So
Okay.
if that's what we're doing, and it sounds like you've walked me into it, which is, Ms. Stephen, in the next discussion is gonna say, I'd like this resolution with these dates, we're reaffirming. This board then talks about it and says, yes, we're good with it, or no, we're not, or, hey, we need to modify this a little bit, and now we're good. And staff, please go spend some time on this. Then I'm good, if that's the outcome. Thank you.
I'm following that, and yes, thank you. Want to be cognizant of staff time, that's, yeah. Yes, Mr. Heller.
And if I may, that's the process, right? Everything that just happened here, that means the process worked, right? It got pulled, we had discussion, we had some good collaboration, figure out some next steps, bring it back. So it's things like this in open discussion that I always look forward to say, is the process working and can we catch things and have a conversation about it? So good on staff, and of course, I appreciate the board members here to pull it, have a discussion, and move things forward. So thank you.
So then, if there's no further discussion, I guess you can motion to move it forward for the next agenda. Okay.
This is Matt, I'll second.
All right. Got a motion by Mr. Patterson, second by Mr. Heller to move this forward for this discussion on an upcoming agenda.
Yep.
Did you have any comments, Patty?
Nope.
Okay. All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Passes unanimously. All right, 7-2, a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, to adopt a code of conduct policy for all elected and appointed officials, staff, contractors, consultants, vendors, and all agents acting on behalf or representing Ferguson Township. And I will recognize the manager.
Thank you, Chair. So provided with the agenda is a code of conduct policy for the Board of Supervisors to consider this evening to take action on. This code of conduct has been developed in consultation with the solicitor and is very similar to the one that's been adopted by the county commissioners to be applied for the Center County staff and appointed officials and other agents that act on their behalf. Happy to answer any questions. This comes to the board for formal action, and provided with the agenda is a recommended motion for the board's consideration.
All right, so this is a public hearing, so at this time, you guys already got your hands up. I will call you, have you come forward and give us your name and neighborhood of residence. We'll start with Mr. Glebe, got Mr. Keough on deck.
Wes Glebe, Ferguson Township. I read this. I don't understand it. I want to know what a code of conduct is, what it includes, so on. Because I don't have what you have in your packet.
He just has.
Oh, yeah, it is located online in the agenda packet. What you got outside the room was just the outline. was gonna say, should I defer to the
Have
manager?
a copy for you for your review, if that would be helpful.
Yeah,
I'm happy to share, I had some comments about what, my reading of it. And at the end of the day, as I read this thing, it was duh. Where the expectation is that leadership will act in, comply with all applicable laws, regulations, policies. Business is conducted above the minimum standards required by law. It's really just making sure that everybody that works for and with the township and on behalf of the township is acting in the interest of the township and not of self. There were some specific, conflict of interest type things that you're not, do not have any conflicts. There was the keeping things confidential that are within the township, not kind of telling your buddy about it and, kind of, again, conflict of interest. There was keeping good records and financial records. I think we're looking at keys and the one of these things that's just keeping good records as staff. There were a lot of things in here, but the bottom line was it was kind of and I think what I recall was there wasn't kind of a consolidated, hey, everybody, we need to make sure everybody reads these 2 pages to make sure you're following all the other policies, if I read that right, Madam Manager, again, just make sure that we're all doing our priorities.
when I read this, I said, well, this impacts me because I'm on the board of UAJA and
Thank you so much, Connor.
and didn't, it made me creepy. I didn't know what we were talking about. And what you ascribe to, and have seen paperwork for, I never have. Nobody ever said, oh, you're on the UAJ board, this is this. They never talked about my fiduciary responsibilities or confidentiality. All I know is executive session is not for me to be talking with anybody about, but there was never anything more than that. And so then I see this and it gets me nervous because I love being on the UAJA. I'm grateful to be able to serve my community in that capacity, but I need to know. So I guess I had a big duh too. So,
If you don't mind, Chair, I'll share, I'm happy to share with Mr. Glebe that, following this evening, after there's action taken, it will be distributed to all of the township's appointed officials, all members of our ABCs. The solicitor had also suggested that this also gets sent to and embedded in with our contractors. So just acknowledging that once you are, serving as a agent of Ferguson Township or a representative in any capacity, that you're asked to essentially maintain a level of respect. It's all the things that I think I've already heard, like we already do, but it's just a formal way of aligning all of these shared values that generally I think most of us, if not all of us, already uphold. It's just being abundantly clear that as you're serving and representing Ferguson Township, these are the shared values: honesty, integrity, things that we already know. For example, Mr. Glebe, that you represent when you show up for the UAJA board meetings.
I'm going to read this, and if I have questions.
Please feel free to reach out, yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Glebe. Mr. Keough.
Some of what I had was discussed with Mr. Glebe and the public, but I still do have some questions. The resolution that you have in front of you refers to a code of conduct policy, but the online document calls it a personnel rules and regulations. Are they the same? Are personnel rules and regulations the same as what's referenced in the resolution called Code of Conduct Policy? Question. Are they the same?
So the reference to the personnel employee manual are for employees. So it's referring to code of conduct and work rules. So it's acknowledging that, for example, an appointed official like yourself would not be subject to the work rules and the courtesy and code of conduct policy in the personnel policy. But it does apply to the employees, which is why it says personnel rules and regulations. And so it's referencing to be applicable to staff only, which is already part of a acknowledgement signature submitted to the township when that employee onboarded with their employment for Ferguson Township. The code of conduct policy by resolution applies to appointed officials, elected officials, contractors, vendors, and agents representing Ferguson Township.
Okay, and that's not being voted on.
That, the code of conduct policy to be adopted by the board this evening in the form of a resolution is what's being voted on this evening.
I don't remember finding that in the documents online. I mean, I found the personnel rules and regulations document, but I didn't find the code of conduct policy.
The code of conduct policy 02132025-final is uploaded right below section 28 work rules amended.
Okay, I will admit to you all, this is confusing. This is confusing, you know, to just a general citizen reading these documents and trying to find out what applies to whom. I made the assumption that the personnel rules and regulations were part of this code of conduct policy that was being referenced in the resolution. And apparently it's not. Is that correct?
That's a great observation. It's not relevant to the appointed official like yourself. So following the board's action this evening, what would happen is a letter would go out with an invitation to meet with the HR director and or myself to discuss how the code of conduct policy, which would be adopted by resolution. So once the board takes formal action, as you know, Mr. Keough, the staff then will facilitate the actual policy implementation. And so after tonight's action, we would provide you with a copy of the code of conduct policy adopted by the resolution. We would provide a copy of that and then also invite you in for any questions or conversation that you may have to ensure that the clarity of its interpretation and application are clear, as we would for all of our appointed officials and members of ABCs.
And the personnel rules and regulations will not be applied to ABC
correct
people. That was not clear. It's not clear in what I'm reading.
Thank you.
It was a jump, but it was an assumption that was made that this whole document called Personnel Rules and Regulations was going to be applied to elected officials, appointed staff, contractors, consultants, vendors, and other agents.
Thank you. I wrote down your comments and we'll certainly share that for future development of policy for board consideration.
Another comment I have, and I can understand in the resolution the reference to appointed officials and elected officials. And I can understand the reference to staff. The appointed contractors and vendors reference in the resolution. How many vendors do you have? You don't have to answer this tonight, but I'm sure it's in the hundreds of vendors for this township. And how are we going to do that with our vendors? Bury it in some contract language, I guess. But it just seems to me that this is somewhat of a legislative reach in terms of a policy. You'd have to explain to me how vendors would be an appropriate reference in this resolution, because I don't see it.
Let me ask you a question, sir. Maybe let me flip the question back to you. If there's confidential information that a vendor is viewing for the township, of the township data, wouldn't we expect them to not disclose any of that data?
Yeah, I mean, that seems logical, yes.
And so then I would maybe offer that the things in this code of conduct, which I know you read the policy one that was for staff, but the code of conduct is really about, as I told Mr. Glebe there, that it was kind of duh. You know, we should treat people with respect. We should, when we have confidential information, keep it confidential. When we,
But see, it
so on and so
doesn't
forth.
differentiate between confident, it says vendors. And you've got a paper vendor, you've got an ink vendor, we deal with a lot of vendors.
Sure, and for the most part, a vendor that has, this code of conduct applies to them, at least as I understand it, and somebody can correct me, it applies to them. If they have no confidential information, doesn't apply. But if they go in there and they berate any of our staff, they're out of here, and we're gonna reference the code of conduct.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, I could attest to that. As a freelance merchandiser, I go into businesses all over the place, and there's some through my company, I can't go into their establishment and do work unless I agree to their policy, because I'm technically a guest in their house. And yeah, if I misbehave or do something that violates their policies or codes, I am subjected to disciplinary action. So I have to agree and abide by those rules when I'm in those establishments.
But it would seem to me that that's a relationship between the contractor or the vendor and management relationship. One other comment that I have, the personnel rules and regulations that are online, this appears to be a modification of an April 20th, 2015 document, is that correct?
That is correct.
But it was not redlined, so I can't tell what the changes are. At least the document that was online was not redlined. So it's very difficult for me to respond in a public hearing to the changes that you're making, because I don't know which ones they are. Now, I suppose I could have tried to find the original and compared them word by word, but it would seem to me that it should have been redlined to indicate what the changes are, omissions, additions, whatever, just to make it easier to understand. I wrote a statement on the on the personnel rules and regulations, which I now understand don't apply to ABCs. But I didn't understand that before. But I wrote the statement, can I like a Facebook posting criticizing the township? Is that a violation of anything? If on Facebook I click the like that somebody is saying, gee, the township should have done such and such, not so-and-so. Does that constitute a violation for staff, for ABC, for whomever? Not clear. On the staff personnel rules and regulations, I asked the question, can I disagree with a supervisor as part of a discussion about a work assignment or a work rule without risk? As an employee, can I disagree with my supervisor as part of a discussion about a work assignment without any risk, based on the document that we have? And I don't know the answer to that. I suspect that we'll have to have, a solicitor answer that question, or at least review it.
Actually, Mr. Keough, it would be an executive session discussion, because it would be related to personnel.
So I have a comment. I'll just read to you because you didn't see it yet. In the code of conduct itself, there's a section about dealing with outside people and organizations. And I think it addresses exactly what you're saying. It says everyone must take care to separate their personal roles from their Ferguson Township positions when communicating on matters not involving Ferguson Township business. Employees and officials must not use Ferguson Township identification, stationery supplies, facilities, and equipment for personal or political matters. When dealing with anyone outside the organization, employees and officials must take care not to compromise the integrity or damage the reputation of either the Ferguson Township or any outside individual, business, or governmental body. And so, Mr. Keogh, liking a Facebook post of that it's your personal Facebook, and you're liking a post of somebody else criticizing the township, that's Bill Keogh liking somebody else's post, and that is personal. If it was if your Facebook post was Bill Keogh, planning commission member, planning commission member, just clear as day, liking that post and making a comment, I am the Ferguson Township Planning Commission member, and yes, that planning director is ... Negativity in the ... That is in violation of this code of conduct.
And I agree with you. However, what we've just discussed doesn't exist in these documents.
No, it's in the code of conduct. I just read you from the doc. I'm with you. It's not in the, but I guess I was just maybe tying it back to what we as a policy-making body are doing here is we're authorizing this Exhibit A, which is the code of, or the resolution with Exhibit A, which is the code of conduct, and that is, it is accounted for in what you just described, those questions from your.
And I do believe that education through the township for ABC people and so on becomes a critical, a much more critical piece than it's my impression it has been in the past.
Absolutely, and in fact, I believe in one of the briefings I had from our assistant township manager on the ABC orientation, that was actually a discussion at great length, which is if you're representing yourself as an individual at any type of event, you can speak freely on a matter, related to the township or unrelated to the township. If you're referencing and identifying yourself as a, for example, Board of Supervisor member of the board at Ferguson Township, you've then kind of checked yourself in to speak about matters that have already or only been approved by the board, and you're referencing communication consistent and aligned with the board. But if you say, just as a resident of Ferguson Township, even though you may be a board member, much like Supervisor Patterson has already shared, that is certainly your right to do and your freedom of speech. And Assistant Township Manager, and I'll yield the floor to him if he wants to elaborate, but it's my understanding that those conversations have been at great length as part of that new ABC orientation that we have just started implementing in the last year. So I'll yield the floor and see if James wants to talk a little bit more about that, because I think you're absolutely right, Mr. Keogh. That is such a critical part in future onboarding, and it's a new development. The township has not had in the past an ABC orientation manual for ABC members and appointed officials. So we're really looking forward to integrating in this code of conduct policy into that orientation as well.
Well, it's been, I'm not against anything in here. I'm not opposed to it. However, the interpretation of some of the language that is here is not evident. And it's only through these kinds of discussions. I would certainly not use the word extensive when describing the discussions in the orientation in terms of this kind of an item. It was discussed. I was there, but I would not use the word extensive. And we didn't have the documents in front of us that we're looking at here. But now I find out that the code of conduct is not the same thing as the personnel behavior thing, and that we're not required to be a part of. So it's hard to get volunteers from the community to come forward with ABCs, folks. And so in whatever you pass, while I don't condone any kind of bad behavior, I also don't condone overreach on the part of any government environment that would discourage good people from coming forward. And as I read what is on the agenda stuff, it certainly concerned me. Some of that has been cleared up. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? I see you, Wes, but I'm gonna go to the back of the room, as there was one ahead of you that was waiting patiently. Ms. Coral, please step forward. Thank you, Omari.
Kayla Coral, Ferguson Township representative. Just to touch base on the code of conduct, towards the end of Bill Keough, I think the point he was trying to clarify, and maybe it's my interpretation, is that I think the code of conduct is fantastic. I work in corporate world. I know that a code of conduct has to be black and white because there's always someone who's going to test a boundary. My only concern is the overreach and who is going to be responsible for policing it. Is it going to be something that only comes out when you've had a bad day and now you want to find something to hold against someone? Is it going to be a daily thing that someone's going to police every single day and be consistent with? That's my only caution to you, is that I think there absolutely needs to be one. I just hope that it's going to be used daily and not when it's convenient to retaliate, for a lack of a better description. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
I will.
Go ahead, Mr.
Well, Ms. Cora, I just have to say, I feel like I'm pretty fiery. I have no problems having a discussion with anybody, anytime, anywhere. And so hopefully no one said, well, Omari, that's out of bounds. And I don't think I've heard that yet. So I think, I'm probably a litmus test for what the limits are. I think berating staff is a perfect example of just not okay. Right? Like, we're all volunteers. We're all kind of up here trying to do our best for our community. And so to have words other than thank you for our staff and hey, can you tighten up here and there? Not okay. And just so I'm with you, conveniently trying to follow it, not okay, but certainly consistency is important. Over.
The only reason I bring that up is because from the corporate world, a code of conduct tends to disappear on the daily, but comes out conveniently when we no longer like that employee. So that is the basis of my statement. Wholeheartedly, I think that discussions like you, Omari, I love listening to you. Matt, I think you're all fantastic. You all bring great things to the board, and it's important to have those conversations. But my experience in the corporate world is that code of conduct gets stated like that. So I'm also notorious for being quiet and letting things go until it's too late. So if I can bring my experience forward and just say it as a statement, I can feel better when I go home that I've at least saved maybe the next person. I'm not saying that the township or the board of supervisors or anybody is going to do that. It's just my experience outside. I think that's what makes us all unique and special. We all have our own experiences. So that's all I have to say on the code of conduct.
I couldn't quite hear. Who did you love hearing speak? I totally.
Okay, I have to reel it in because I think your ego's already big enough. But there we go.
All right.
Mr. Glebe, step on up.
Wes Glebe, Ferguson Township. Now, I've been around a while. And so this is a question that specifically came up about the chairman of the tree commission. Okay, so he's an ABC. He also, as I recall, his field was trees. I don't know, whatever he did up on campus was about forestry. And he came in one night and very carefully said, this is who I am, and I'm not speaking as the chairman of the tree commission. Then he went on to say what he wanted to say, and he was sanctioned. He was reprimanded. So I'm just thinking in terms of, you know, a little bit of past. You get what I'm saying? It's confusing. And I think it comes down to personalities a lot of times. And he was a very polite man, but whatever he had to say, maybe nobody wanted to hear. I forget, but it didn't go the way you're saying tonight it should go. So I think overreach is what Bill was talking about, and maybe that's always in the wings.
It sounds like that happened even though there wasn't a code of conduct policy.
Yeah, I don't know what year it was, but it was in the teens.
Yeah, it was. As far as I recall, Centrise wasn't the manager. It goes down to, I would say it comes down to personnel that I don't want to get into.
Okay, I just wanted to throw that little bit of history in there.
But yeah. Any other public comments? If not, the public hearing is now closed. Does the board have a motion?
This is Omari, I move to adopt the resolution.
Do we have a second?
This is Patty, I'll second.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Patterson, second by Ms. Stevens. Any discussion?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Heller.
A couple things I noted, if, just looking at the code of conduct, number 1 and number 13 are very similar with overlap. So I'm wondering if those should be condensed or clarified.
This would be on.
I can read them.
On the code of conduct, so like the top of the tone, or the tone at the top.
Well, no,
This would be on the employee personnel manual side.
I'm sorry, this is on the personnel rules and regulations, so maybe not. Yeah, we're not gonna discuss that. So then maybe this is something for a future,
We can go to exec session.
I'm sorry?
We can go into an exec session if we want to talk about the personnel policy.
No, maybe we'll put it on the docket for another exec session, because again, I just see some similarities and other things.
All right, so I'm gonna do some fun stuff here.
Okay.
I move to amend the motion to add with clarifications to with clarifications for which documents are for staff and which documents are for appointed and elected officials.
Do we have a second to the amended motion?
This is Matt, I'll second.
So, yeah, there's two motions that I'm trying to think.
So vote on the amendment first, and then Matt will
Okay.
amend the main motion, and then we vote on the main motion.
Vote amended. I'm trying to think if I needed to vote that now or.
We did.
Okay.
We did.
So let's vote on the amended motion. So all those in, well, it did, okay, it did have a proper first and second. I don't know if amendment is subject, it is subject to debate. So any discussion on the amended motion?
I was just gonna say, so you just wanted to say code of conduct to apply to this group of people, and then the other?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Any other further discussion? Otherwise, all in favor of the amended motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Aye. Motion is on the table as amended. Further discussion on the main motion. Did you have anything, Mr. Heller?
Nothing.
When I was looking through this, Madam Manager, I kind of feel like that maybe there's some areas that could maybe be more clearly stated. And I bring this up because I was somewhat aware of an incident in Center County where an elected official had made some comments that were very, very questionable in nature and did bring a lot of public outcry. Just thinking, I think as adults we would know that, know and understand if, whether we go to social media or, just randomly say something at a grocery store or any medium of communication, that we would be mindful of what we're saying outside of, that of a public meeting. But unfortunately, there's been an instance where that is not the case. Just wondering how this would apply. So if a planning commission member was to go on social media and say some very disturbing things, how and where would we address that? But also, again, making sure that they are understanding of this policy. Even your conduct outside of here, if you were, whether you say something online or you cause a scene at a nearby store, that, there could be repercussions to that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm happy to provide some clarity. I would acknowledge that there is a signature section. So what we would do after the board took action is we would, provide, for example, to appointed officials, elected officials, members of our ABCs, they would receive a communication from the township and, with an invitation, if interested, to come in and have have dialogue with the staff so they can understand how it's applied. And maybe furthermore to your other question, if I understood it correctly, it's not just, does an individual go to the podium and say something and now we're going to sanction them, as it may have happened in previous years. It would be a report of misconduct, and it would need to be properly investigated as indicated in the policy. And then following that investigation would yield a determination or a conclusion. And at that point, then, as the manager, I would give consideration, is this a sit down and a coaching? Most times it is a coaching. Most times it's oftentimes just something is said and maybe pairing, their status or affiliation with the township and maybe not really thinking, and so a coaching is suffice. Other times it's a little bit more clear perhaps to the story that you're providing in reference to an incident in the county, in which case it might be a consideration for a conversation. Is this a good time for you to give your service to the township? I don't know that a heavy hand would come in any circumstance outside of a very, very derogatory or perhaps even criminal, type of circumstance that would need to be proven through the investigation for a determination. So I just want to acknowledge that the policy, the code of conduct policy, does have a signature section, and so that's how our individuals that are affiliated with the township in some manner are informed, with an invitation and opportunity to have some dialogue with HR and or myself. And then of course, how do we determine and apply the code of conduct? If there is a complaint, it's through an investigation of some kind. And I will share too, this went through our solicitor, labor counsel review for, ensuring that the language was written in such a way that can be further supported if we were needing to involve legal.
And it sounds like it does somewhat go even outside of a meeting, because like in the instance that was brought to my attention, there was policy, but it was only for in-meeting conduct. So it's like, yeah, this person isn't necessarily like bounded or,
Right.
So, if they want to say something on the radio or in the grocery store, that's their,
I will say too, in the other, to sort of talk about what you're getting at, is that for elected officials, sometimes it's hard to hold them accountable So, and when you're trying to correct maybe a misstep of somebody who's an elected official, and you're like, well, what are you gonna do about it, right? We were elected. So either that's where then constituents have, there are procedures, like recalls or don't vote for them, everyone's up for reelection, that sort of thing. So I appreciate your concern, and thank you for voicing it, but in some cases, you just have to let it play out.
And yeah, totally understandable, but, yes, Mr. Heller.
No, I think just
sorry.
kind of recapping everything here, and I appreciate the discussion and understanding where electeds and employees, where those overlaps potentially or gray areas are as well, because the way I've always understood it, because we collect a check here as elected officials, for those that don't know, yes, we do get paid just about $4,000 a year, so my $135 every 2 weeks. That puts us in a different category, or we have to follow or subscribe to other employee-type rules as opposed to just a code of conduct. So,
You're right.
yeah, so I clarity on where that is and what those look like would greatly be appreciated.
Yeah.
Your payment is not a salary. It is a reimbursement, and that's how it was set up. You're not salaried by the township.
Right?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm good to move forward. And yeah, I just thank everyone here.
Yeah.
I've not got any word about any misconduct from you folks, so,
Give them our
thank,
more time.
Oh,
thank you for conducting
That's
yourselves
against it.
professionally here as well as anywhere else, so.
yes.
And always be mindful of that, what you say, whether it's on the radio or social media, or even how you act in a store can, people can recognize us, and that's the other thing too about our meetings, it's all being recorded on television to be seen and whatnot, so it can be, it kind of lives out there, so. That's all I'm gonna say. So, there's no further discussion. I'll hand it over to the manager to call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. This is a roll call vote for Resolution 2025-06. Ms. Stevens?
Yes?
Mr. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Heller?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Strickland?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair, and the policy passes unanimously.
Thank you. All right, item 7.3, discussion and authorization for advertisement of a public hearing on an amendment of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, Chapter 5, Code Enforcement, Part 3, Building Safety and Property Maintenance Code. And I will recognize the manager.
Thank you, Chair. I will actually recognize that we have the Center Region Code Administrator, Executive Director Walt Schneider with us this evening, and he will discuss the two areas for proposed amendments to the ordinance, lease payments, and payments.
Good evening, Walter Schneider. I'm your building code official and the agency director for Center Region Code Administration. What you have before you is a recommendation for an ordinance change which would basically repeal two sections of the Center Region Rental Housing and Building Safety Code. We have worked with basically a fair housing expert in the Pittsburgh area, along with Terry Williams, who's our solicitor and the solicitor for the borough, continuously on this section of the Center Region Rental Housing and Building Safety Code, some of which, as we discussed when this was originally passed, this is really cutting edge. And as case law changes and some legal opinions change, it was found that these two sections, we believe, their protections are actually guaranteed and taken care of at state law level as compared to at the local level. And so we don't want to basically step on the state law. We can't. And so the recommendation from legal counsel, both ours directly as well as the experts we've been dealing with in the Pittsburgh area, are to remove these two sections because we believe they would bring potential for legal action against the document. And so the recommendation is to remove these two sections, believing that the protections that these afford are already in landlord-tenant regulations and other protections across the state. The similar proposals have been made for College Township, and the Borough of State College is also acting accordingly. You're the three bodies that have adopted these sections.
All right, any questions for Mr. Schneider? Yes, Patty?
I'm just sort of curious, so as we are doing here, like a process of cleaning up and reviewing, is that how this came up, was a process of cleaning up and reviewing?
So these sections originally were proposed by a number of advocates for basically tenants' rights. On an ongoing basis, there is interpretation of state landlord-tenant law and so on. And we also get case law because of things that have changed due to lawsuits and so on. From the time that the original presentation was made and the attorneys have reviewed this before you adopted it and said, yep, it's good, to now, there was a recommendation that these two sections, we believe, based on case law, have been deemed to be covered under the tenant landlord laws at the state level. And so we believe that leaving them in at the local level could cause problems. And so the recommendation, again, with some of these regulations, the legislation, as we put them in the code, until they're tested someplace, you don't know exactly where they're sitting. And so some things that have come out of other regulations and interpretations of those regulations at the state level, basically our best legal advisors have said, you probably want to pull these two out. And so our recommendation from the Center Region is to pull these two out, and we've made that recommendation to College, the Borough, as well as Ferguson Township.
I appreciate the diligence and staying on top of it, that's amazing.
That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Mr. Heller?
I just want to say, Mr. Schneider, I always appreciate you coming in and speaking with us about these. Always articulate, direct, and insightful. To that, I also know that you would never put residents, individuals in harm's way. So hearing your recommendation to have these removed, et cetera, tells me that there is no concern and that it is handled in other places and that does not negatively impact the safety, which is what code is about, of the residents and others there. So I have no issues with this, and again, just want to thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Patterson?
I'll wait till in general, all of these things in this section, that's really just a couple of changes, but any issues with any of them, they come to you, right? Residents come to you.
Correct.
And maybe they can let Manager Martin know, but she's gonna come to you.
Correct.
Okay, very good, thank you.
I'm likely sending them to him.
Oh, sure.
With a very nice, call me if you are unable to get it resolved, but I always have faith that Mr. Schneider is taking care of it, and I don't have residents follow back up with me, so thank you for that.
And we try and, usually the minute we get the phone call, we try and work it out immediately. Getting it all the way to this end, we found most landlords really want to do the right thing and want to work with the tenants because they want good tenants. And so, good landlords and good tenants make a really great relationship, and we try and foster that.
I was gonna say, I think we're ready for a motion.
This is Matt. I move that the Board of Supervisors move to authorize advertisement for a public hearing to approve the ordinance amendment. Sorry.
This is Patty, I'll second.
We got a motion by Mr. Heller, seconded by Ms. Stevens. I apologize. I I am somewhat still sleepy at 8:30 in the morning and couldn't realize published from public. Any further discussion? Otherwise, thank Mr. Schneider for stopping out tonight. Looks like we'll have you out of here before 8 o'clock still. If no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Motion passes unanimously before 8 o'clock. All right, 7.4, discussion and authorization to advertise a public hearing on the amendment to an ordinance of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania for Chapter 20, Solid Waste, Section 1, Solid Waste Management, and Section 2, Recycling. And I will recognize the Planning and Zoning Director.
Thank you.
So yes, this is a request to authorize a public hearing, and background, on January 7th of this year, the Board of Supervisors heard a presentation on the Model Municipal Solid Waste Ordinance. January 21st, we amended the fee schedule to update the solid waste removal fees effective April 1st. That aligns with the new waste removal contract, also beginning April 1st. Commencement of that contract also requires an update to Chapter 20 of the Ferguson Township Code. It's Parts 1, solid waste, 2, recycling. Included in the agenda is, it's in two parts, the draft ordinance with stricken language and underlined language to show the changes, and again, to match the model ordinance with some tiny tweaks to match our existing ordinance. There also included is a delegation of enforcement authority related to the waste section. In that section, we are also still in talks with the solicitor. We're communicating on the best language for that portion, so you will receive something that is updated in time for the public hearing. Also included, there's a name change from Center County Solid Waste Authority to Center County Recycling and Refuse Authority. And then separately and subsequent to this, the board will receive a resolution to actually delegate enforcement as well. And the recommended motion is, of course, that you authorize the public hearing. And that date would be March 4th.
If there are no questions, I would entertain a motion.
This is Matt. I move that the Board of Supervisors authorize an advertisement for a public hearing to amend Chapter 20, Solid Waste Management, Part 1, Solid Waste, and Part 2, Recycling at the March 4th, 2025 Board of Supervisors meeting.
Do we have a second?
This is Patty, I'll second.
Got a motion by Mr. Heller, seconded by Ms. Stevens. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. All right, passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Item 7.5, board member request, 2025 revenue consideration. And for this, Mr. Patterson is recognized.
All right, this is the last item before we're out of here, so I'll try to make it as simple as I can. The thing that keeps me up at night as it relates to the work that we have to do here as a team is the budget, and the budget. And there's two halves to that. There's the expense side, which we did some work there for 25. I know Madam Manager's working with her team to kind of work on that expense side, bringing some innovations to the table. But specifically for what we have here today, now it's the revenue side for those things to balance. And one thing that I recognized, or was brought to my attention actually by a constituent, was that we don't have a revenue generation model consistent with the state or federal ways that revenues are received. And so I'm asking the board to direct staff to investigate the differences between those revenue models and to understand if there's any ways for Ferguson Township to be consistent with those particular models. I will give an example that when I file my taxes, my local taxes are earned income, and and that's it for me. However, at the federal and the state levels, I'm also claiming the distributions from LLCs of which I'm a member of. And so I'm paying taxes on those things at the federal and state level, but not at the local level. So that's just one example. I don't know of any other ways. I just know my personal example, way in which I am, and I'm not asking to pay more taxes. However, maybe it makes sense to be more consistent with the way federal and state taxes are administered from a township perspective. And I'll pause there.
Any questions for Mr. Heller? I mean, for Mr. Patterson, Mr. Yes, Mr. Heller, you are recognized.
Yeah, I appreciate the recommended motion, and I'm all for it, especially as what it would be highlighting are the differences. And that's the part, as the discussion potentially moves forward, that I'm most interested in. Not just a recommendation. I think recommendations and everything potentially will come down the road, but for me, I'm looking for the analysis and that gap very first. And so if this, and I don't know if we need to amend the motion, but to focus a significant amount of the time or a majority of the time on the gap, that's what I'm most interested in. Not just how do we move to something that's similar to a state or a federal model, but what's the actual gap?
How would just thinking through that,
Please.
how would one, and a question to you, how would one identify that gap?
Yeah. I would look for, even the simple comparison tables, state does this, federal does this, we do this instead. There's a different model. What is that gap, that difference? So if anything, I would just be curious to better understand that, what I'll call gap and difference. And then continue the conversation as to, now potentially, how do we move to something that's more similar to those? So, again, maybe, I don't know, the motion is there, I'm happy to amend it with those specifics, but it's, I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
I think you're spot on that, yes, in my motion, there's like moving toward another thing, but in the interim of moving toward anything, you're doing that, what is this that we're moving toward and how does it fit? What's that puzzle that we're building up? So, yeah, whatever language you think to add to this to kind of give it that interim step. Because I think there is before we move toward anything, there's here are the ways in which there are differences, and then there's a next step from this body, yeah.
So if I may amend the motion.
I think you should move whatever way moves you.
Okay, I'll make a motion then, that the Board of Supervisors move to direct the manager to investigate in Q1 the differences between local, state, and federal taxes, and how the township could what the township could do to move to an income tax similar to the state and federal taxes.
I second.
Motion by Mr. Heller, second by Mr. Patterson.
So Chair, I just want to acknowledge, it said Q1.
I was
It
going
very
to
well
I was
said
gonna ask you about that.
Q2 and Q3, because to do an analysis of all of the revenue collected by the state and the federal, it's going to take a long time. We are in the middle of auditing. We're soon going to be rolling into CIP preparation. So I'm just happy to do it, but I want to acknowledge that if we are going to do an assessment to evaluate all of the revenue generated by federal and state to compare what we do can be done, but respecting staff's workload, you know, being able to use PTO, et cetera, I would say certainly Q1, Q2, and we can give an update as to where we are.
That's helpful. I would offer we stick with a plan. And if there's some, hey, we're not gonna make it, that you come back and say, here's why we can't make it. But I don't think the ask is to go investigate all the revenues coming in federally. No. It's really the structure. Not the actual numbers of the revenues. It's,
Right.
you know, when
assess
one
and
files
all
their
the revenue.
taxes federally, state, locally, these are the things included. And I don't know that that's something that needs to, I need to send somebody to learn all of that.
I don't know that, is what I'm saying.
Right,
And
because there may be
because I don't know
preemptions.
that, once we dive into that analysis, I want to make sure we have realistic expectations for us to come back with an accurate and complete report. It could be we have it ready in Q1, but I also am unaware what that actual evaluation produces. And if you were to have asked for numbers, I would say probably closer to like Q3, Q4. But even just to be able to identify, because while we all know you have to do your general, tax, everybody has a tax, they have to file their taxes. But as you've acknowledged as a business owner, you've discovered a new tax that others weren't considering. And I would imagine, but I could be wrong, and happy to give a report once we initiate this, that once we go down that road to better understand what the revenue structures are federally, and then identify the gap between federal and state and local, what those revenue, sources are, I don't know. And that's in part what I just want to acknowledge, is that I'm unsure what that analysis produces. And so if we're transitioning away from a very specific earned income to be levied on business owners to a assessment, I believe staff can do that. I want to acknowledge that it may be several months before we have that complete analysis complete.
What if we were to strike down this motion and then revise it to talk about, investigate the level of effort to essentially do that level of detailed analysis or difference comparison? Or is there another way that we could just say, box the time in and say, please don't spend more than X amount of time over the next months investigating something, bring us a rock, and then we say, yeah, that's not the rock we wanted. And then could it be a blue rock? And then we go back and we have a blue rock next time. I don't know. I'm curious to know what options we might have.
Because this is very, very hot,
Yeah.
there's no greater thing that we need. We're gonna get to October very soon. So I don't know that waiting for 9 months for something is the way to go, or 6 months. I think that in 6 weeks, there could be some level of research and some bit of here's where we are right now. Here are the questions we still need to answer for ourselves. I'm not asking for perfection. I think Q1 is the right first step to, in doing a little bit of research, a lot of research, whatever timing and work planning and day-to-day jobs and audit questions are coming in, hey, here's where we are right now, report to the board, that has X. I don't know what that is, but I think I'd like to hold to some amount of time. Q1's done in 6 weeks. Up there's 7 weeks, I think. And so what amount can we get there? And then in 7 weeks, that we then assess and make further direction for Q2.
To do what's initially proposed in your agenda packet or your agenda item, or to do the analysis of federal, state, and local, just for clarification. So going in and doing a research on the agenda item as it's been presented, That is something we can do. And then if we see other opportunities that could be applicable for local government, we can report on that as we're kind of assessing to see, can we do what you had initially put in there? Or are we focusing more on an analysis of that federal state? Because that's kind of like the needle in a haystack, if I'm being honest, because we'd have to go and assess to see all the revenue sources for federal and state. And I don't know what that looks like. But we can initiate that and then bring it back to let you know where we are with what we've observed. How does that?
So I think what I heard from Supervisor Heller was kind of this matrix of,
right,
here's what they do Fed, here's what they do state, here's a local, and they're same, nothing for local and everything for state and federal. And so if in 7 weeks you come back with, here's what we do on the local level, we do these, it's really simple, earned income.
Right.
If you have a single person LLC for accounting, we charge, and there's what we don't do. And then here's what the state does, because it's all the things that we don't do for local. And if you don't get the federal, that's okay for now. Again, it's back to the board saying for Q2, yeah, can you add that federal stuff in there so we can see that? I think there's a both and, again, and I just want to, 7 weeks, what can you do? What can you get done in this motion that's been generated? I mean, if you need an amendment to say interim or draft or as much as you can do based on day-to-day work, okay, happy to make that motion. But I think, again, 7 weeks, what can you give us that'll at least give us a starter, a little something to kind of start wrapping our brains around, because this is going to hit us very soon. 8 months, we're looking at your new budget that you're going to present and say, here you go, guys. I don't want to, I'd like to have time to think through this, and really we've got to start collecting some data points to consider for next year.
We can start with doing an assessment of what the state, the revenue sources that are facilitated at the state level, to be able to compare that to what our revenue sources are at the local level. And we can present where we are in 7 weeks. And that's what I can share with you. I don't know where we will be. We might say, oh, there's actually a whole other list, Schedule C, E, F, and G, and we're now, we're still conducting that. Or we may have a very complete list for you. I don't know. And going back to those realistic expectations, we can certainly work toward that goal in Q1. I just want to be mindful that the work plan for staff is something that is constantly, I applaud staff for all that they multi-juggle as is, but I also am right alongside the board in that we do have to figure out ways that we move forward to ensure that our expenditures and revenues are balanced. So we will give it our best, acknowledging that Q1 will initiate the research. That's what I can say. What it produces, I'm really reserved to say what we'll be able to achieve, but we will give it our best shot at initiating that research and bringing you back what we've found in conducting an analysis of what the state revenue sources are.
And if I could add to that, again, the amended motion that I offered was really the idea of just saying, I think that's a step that needs to be called out. It's not, and I want to make this clear, it's not to bog down in staff time, it's not to bog down this moving forward. And I think I just want to make this very public record that at the end of 7 weeks, when we do get the report, maybe we do smash a go fast button. Maybe that's okay, we see it and we have the a la carte menu, we don't want this, we don't want this, we want these 3 things, etc. And we smash the go fast button. So again, it's just something I think we need to at least better understand the context and the environment of the tax situation for those different areas. So thank you.
Ms. Strickland?
Yeah, I would just highlight what you're saying there and just offer that I think because municipalities my understanding is we can't just tax all income, that I think highlighting what we're hearing are, you know, some really encouraging things, like what, you know, what are all of the options, say local services tax, you know, just, that's just the one that's popping into my head. But then also just trying to think for our next discussion, where do we want to be heading toward this? You know, is it a discussion on how do we change what it is we're allowed to do? Is that the direction? Or is it, you know, that and an immediate change to kind of give us some relief for this year and next year? So I think just trying to kind of be mindful of where we want this to land, you know, what kind of results do we want to see in this? And I think this just kind of very preliminary look at options and, you know, what some other different level of entities are exercising, I think will be interesting. But just I think, you know, being working out in our own minds where it is we want to take those next steps, because like Amari's saying, if we want some kind of impact this year, we need to be moving toward that. But I just really appreciate the creativity, so I appreciate you bringing this. Thank you.
I appreciate what Supervisor Strickland just shared. I want to reiterate that we would likely, if doing something outside of what's already in our authority as outlined in our code, the first step would actually, it could be that we need to amend our code before we actually, so that's why I want to be mindful of this first step and how much time we invest in that. And so we can do the analysis, we will do the analysis, but acknowledging that, you know, we want to move it just as fast as you do, because the first step is to actually make any change would be exploring with the solicitor, can we make an amendment? Does the local government have the authority to levy this tax, this meaning whatever we end up coming up with, and then what might we need to change in our code to actually give us the authority to do so? So happy to initiate that research, and if the board has a very specific, narrowed focus that you want the research to focus in on, we will take that on as well.
I gave the example of multi-member LLCs because that is an example of where I do not pay earned income or I don't pay any local taxes on those distributions I receive. I'm speaking for myself. So I'm not singling anybody else but if I'm gonna pay a little bit more from my distributions, well, maybe there's others that have the same thing. And then, we all across the township have a lower rate because I'm just, you know, it's an interesting thing to think about.
Absolutely, and I think that's something that's far more attainable to do and commit to saying we can give you a response within Q1, likely, right? We can easily identify what is this type of tax that you're, you know, being assessed, and is this within the purview of local government? Is it first class township, second class township? Because we're a home rule charter, could we just amend it, our charter to be able, so I just want to acknowledge the two different asks here, both incredibly great creative options, happy to do the work. One likely yields a response sooner than an analysis. The long-term analysis, I think, will be far more helpful in being able to assess all of our options. The very focused research to identify, is this an option, would yield maybe next steps, immediate next steps.
With the motion that's on the table, both are gonna happen, it sounds like. Only one of them, it's all gonna happen. It's just in the incomplete draft that you bring forward in 7 weeks, there will be 3 things perhaps that there's some deltas, not 30, because you can't do all that research. You know, some 3 with, hey, we need to change code. Yeah. We'll need to do this, we'll need to do that.
Well,
so I'm acknowledging, ma'am, that there's a couple of things that you can do and you can dig a little deeper, and some things you won't be able to get to in 7 weeks. And so bringing that forward, this board can then make a next direction to say in Q2, keep going, find the other 27 things that you can do, and move forward on at least this 1 or 2, maybe.
We'll step into each phase here that
Yes.
it sounds
Yes.
like we're on, because I just want to be mindful of staff workload and maintaining our existing commitments. But yes, we will step into all of it and be able to report with updates that hopefully get us in the direction we all want to be in, which
Copy
is,
that.
yeah.
Hearing this menu of options that it sounds like we're looking for, I I'll just say, Madam Vice President within PML, it sounds like this might be something that they may actually have that data, since they have been trying to advocate with Harrisburg to update how municipalities collect revenue. Because it's a very antiquated, outdated system that does leave us limited.
Yes, thank you. And so PML has assessed some options, and right now we're lobbying for legislation that would give local government the autonomy to increase local real estate transfer tax. So right now it's capped, and there is legislation on the table to give the autonomy to the local governments, municipalities, to be able to increase that if they so desire.
Yes, Mr. Heller.
It also sounds like an opportunity for AI to get involved, right? Open comparisons of public information, depending on which AI tool is used, might alleviate some concerns to at least give a baseline.
I'll be sending my analysis to you, Madam Manager, from ChatGPT.
In about 15 minutes, right?
I was just gonna say, we'll have to get a 30-minute review.
There you
Well,
go.
I was gonna say, if you can do it with AI, why are we asking the manager to do it?
Yeah, I think AI pulls though from existing, right? We're trying to be cutting edge, it sounds like, and come up with
Yeah.
something that, I mean, arguably, if it's something that's already been done, we probably would have heard about it through our participation with PML. So exploring creative options as to how we can leverage our home rule charter kind of puts us on a different trajectory, which hopefully yields us with some great outcome.
Yeah, good.
So let me know if AI works.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe AI's got a new way to compute ideas not currently online. I don't know.
And a good plug AI, just like any other technology or even the calculator, like don't necessarily
It
take
needs
it
to be reviewed.
for everything. Yes, review it.
Yes.
Any other discussion? Otherwise, we have a motion on the table as stated by Mr. Heller earlier, so. Yeah, I guess the voice vote. So all those in favor would say aye.
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 Any opposed say no. Motion passes unanimously. Any board members have communications they would like to share?
Man, ChatGPT is crunching on this like right now.
Just send that my way.
We might have the answers before adjournment.
You know, my offshore accounts though don't come up, so that's no kidding.
Oh, jeez.
I'm sorry, you asked about.
Communications to the board.
I had communications related to consent agenda items as well as I'm switching over to the new hauler.
Any other communications? Surprisingly not any. All right. Looking over calendar items, the only thing of note would be, again, April 1st, that will be when Bergmeyer starts, so if the cans are rolling out now, so you will get your cans over the next several weeks, and come April 1st, you may then throw your trash in the can and take it out to the curb. So if there's nothing else, I will recognize Ms. Stevens to motion to adjourn.
Yes, motion to adjourn, so moved.
Do we have a second?
This is Matt, I'll second.
All right, we are adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone.